Welcome to House of Horrors. A place where real stories, dark encounters, and unexplained events come to life. Before starting today's video, tell us in the comments where are you watching from and what time is it there so we know from which state people are watching from. Tonight, we bring you 5 terrifying experiences that people have had in Texas ghost towns. From shadowy figures that glide silently through the streets to whispers that chill the blood, these are the stories you won't forget. If you think ghost towns are just empty shells of the past, think again. What you're about to hear is real, and it's waiting in the darkness, just beyond the ruins. Asterisk. The Shadow at Terlingua. Terlingua, Texas, a town carved from the desert, abandoned mines, and sun-baked roads. Today, it's mostly empty, a skeleton of its former mercury mining glory, but it's never truly silent. Locals say the ghostly presence of the miners, and something darker, still lingers in the shadows. I never believed those stories, not until I spent one night there, camera in hand, chasing the ruins of a town that should have been forgotten. It was a late summer evening when I drove into Terlingua. My plan was simple: photograph the remnants of the old saloon, the church, and the crumbling houses before the sun fully disappeared behind the Chizos Mountains. The heat of the day was gone, replaced by the cool, dry air of the desert night. The sky was clear, scattered with stars that seemed impossibly close. I parked my truck near the old saloon, whose walls had partially collapsed. The roof sagged like it was weary of holding itself up. The street was empty, cracked asphalt leading to nothing but sand, scrub brush, and the occasional rusting relic of a bygone era. I grabbed my camera, a DSLR with a wide-angle lens, and started walking slowly, snapping pictures of the weathered structures. At first, everything was quiet. The wind whispered through the ruins, stirring loose papers and dust. The smell of dry earth and old wood filled my senses. I took a few photos of the saloon's front, then turned to the church. That's when I noticed movement, just at the edge of my vision. I froze. A dark shape seemed to linger behind the crumbling wall of the old mercantile. I swung my camera in that direction. Nothing. Just shadows stretching unnaturally. I told myself it was my imagination. Wind. Dust. The way the moonlight bent through the broken windows. But then I saw it again. A figure, tall, black, featureless, gliding across the street toward the old church steps. No legs moving, no arms swinging. Just a silent glide, unnervingly smooth. I clicked the shutter instinctively. The camera whirred. I checked the display. The figure was gone. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but the street was empty. I moved closer to the church, heart pounding. Every step I took seemed to echo unnaturally, bouncing off the ruins as though the walls themselves were amplifying my presence. That's when I felt it, a cold pressure on my shoulders, like the weight of someone standing directly behind me. My breath caught in my throat. "Hello?" I called out, voice shaking. Only the wind responded, rattling the broken windows. Then, from the corner of the church, it emerged fully. A tall, black silhouette, no face, no features, just a presence. Its form absorbed the moonlight. I froze. It raised a hand, pointing at me. Slowly, deliberately. My camera shook in my hands. I ran. Gravel kicked up under my boots as I sprinted toward my truck. Dust clouds rose behind me. The figure didn't chase me, at least not visibly. But as I glanced over my shoulder, I swore I could see its shadow stretching impossibly across the street, following me like a predator. I reached my truck, slammed the door, locked it. My hands were shaking. I started the engine, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. And then, in my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse, the figure standing in the middle of the street, perfectly still, staring. I drove out of Terlingua as fast as I dared. Every turn I made, every shadow on the road seemed like it could be watching, following. When I finally reached a well-lit town over an hour away, my hands stopped shaking, but my mind wouldn't stop replaying the image of that figure. Later, I reviewed the photos. Every frame, every shot, showed something: faint shadows, movements that weren't there when I was taking the picture. In some, I could see the dark figure in the background, impossible distances away, appearing in multiple places at once. I asked locals about it. Some laughed, calling me paranoid. Others, those who had lived there for years, told me quietly to never linger in Terlingua after sunset. They spoke of shadows that weren't cast by anything, shapes that moved silently through the streets, watching visitors, sometimes vanishing entirely when approached. Months later, I returned once during daylight. The town seemed empty, normal, just dust and crumbling walls. But in the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker of movement. A shadow, out of place, gone before I could focus on it. Since that night, I never go back to Terlingua after dark. And every time I see desert towns on the map, I remember that figure. I don't know if it's a ghost, a residual memory of the miners, or something older, something that belongs to the desert itself. Some nights, I dream about it. The shadow, standing on the church steps, pointing, waiting. I wake up with the feeling of eyes on my back, as if it's still there, somewhere between the ruins and the edge of reality. The desert doesn't forget. The ghosts of Terlingua don't either. The Laughing Woman of Shafter. Shafter, Texas, isn't much of a town anymore. Once a bustling mining community in the Chihuahuan Desert, it's now mostly dust, rubble, and silent streets. The occasional visitor comes for photography or history, but locals rarely speak about it, not because it isn't interesting, but because something lives there that most people don't want to see. I had heard whispers about it long before I arrived. Friends and historians mentioned a woman who laughs in the night, wandering among the ruins. They warned me not to spend the night in Shafter, but curiosity got the better of me. I'm a photographer and a storyteller, and ghost towns like Shafter are irresistible. It was late October when I drove into the town. The desert sun had set, leaving a cold, dry night behind. The moon hung low, casting long, eerie shadows across cracked roads and toppled buildings. I parked near what used to be the general store and set up my camera. My plan was simple: photograph the abandoned houses and streets before the desert fully swallowed me in darkness. At first, everything was quiet. The wind stirred loose papers, and the occasional coyote's howl echoed across the hills. The town seemed deserted, the silence absolute. But as I walked toward the center of Shafter, I felt it, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the air. A pressure, a sensation like someone was watching me from the shadows. Then I heard it. A soft, high-pitched laugh, floating through the night. It wasn't a child, it wasn't the wind. It was deliberate. Playful, almost mocking. The kind of laugh that can send a chill crawling up your spine. I froze, scanning the ruined buildings. The streets were empty. Nothing moved. "Hello?" I called, my voice shaky. The laugh continued, faint but unmistakable, coming from the old boarding house at the edge of town. I approached cautiously, flashlight in hand. The closer I got, the louder it became. The sound bounced off the crumbling walls, making it seem like it was everywhere at once. My camera clicked as I raised it, trying to catch something, anything. Shadows shifted behind broken windows, but when I moved, they vanished. Inside the boarding house, the floorboards creaked under my feet. The smell of dust and decay was thick, almost tangible. I stepped into the main room, shining my flashlight across overturned furniture, broken glass, and the remnants of lives long gone. The laugh came again, louder, closer, right behind me. I spun around. Empty. Nothing but shadows and the moonlight through shattered windows. My heart raced, and I knew instinctively that I wasn't alone. Then I saw her. A figure at the top of the stairs. A woman, tall and thin, wearing a tattered dress that swayed as if it were floating just above the floor. Her hair was long, dark, and hung in damp strands, even though there was no water nearby. Her face was pale, almost translucent, but the most terrifying thing was her eyes, black voids that reflected nothing, yet seemed to see everything. She laughed. Not a sound carried by the air, but something deeper, resonating inside my chest, shaking my bones. I raised my camera, shaking, trying to focus. The figure didn't move down the stairs. She didn't need to. Her presence filled the room. The laughter echoed, repeating itself, growing, looping in impossible ways. I backed away. Footsteps on the broken boards, but not mine, hers. The sound came closer, but nothing appeared. My flashlight flickered. The air grew colder, so cold my breath froze in front of me. Who are you?" I stammered. The laugh stopped. Silence returned. But it wasn't peaceful. It was tense, expectant. I could feel her watching. Then, from the corner of the room, I heard it again. A whisper, soft, teasing, almost human. "Stay with me." I ran. Feet pounding against splintered wood, dust rising in my wake. I didn't stop until I was outside, under the open sky. The moonlight felt exposed, revealing, but safer somehow. I didn't look back. I could still hear it faintly, carried by the wind, following me across the street, lingering around the old houses. I got into my truck and drove straight out of Shafter. The desert stretched endlessly, dark and quiet, but I kept glancing at the rearview mirror. Shadows seemed to move in impossible ways. When I reviewed the footage later, I saw it. Just barely. A blur at the top of the stairs in the boarding house. Black hair, pale dress, but no discernible face. And then, a faint, looping blur across the frame, as if the figure had moved impossibly fast. Every photo after that showed subtle signs of movement in places I hadn't been, doors slightly open, shadows in corners where light couldn't reach. Locals told me the story afterward. The woman had been a miner's wife, left behind when the town was abandoned. Some said she went mad, wandering the empty streets at night, searching for the life she lost. Others believed she died in the boarding house, and her laughter is the echo of her sorrow, trapped forever. I've never returned to Shafter at night. I don't plan to. But every time I hear laughter in the wind, especially in quiet desert towns, I remember that night. The sound of her voice, unearthly and endless, as if the ruins themselves were alive and breathing her madness back into the world. And I know, she's still there. Waiting, laughing, and watching anyone who dares step foot into Shafter after dark. The Candlelight in Indianola. Indianola, Texas, once a thriving port town on the Gulf Coast, is now mostly reclaimed by the water and wind. Hurricanes and storms wiped it off the map decades ago, leaving ruins, overgrown streets, and a few scattered foundations. It's a place most people avoid, not just because it's dangerous, but because locals whisper of strange lights that appear at night, moving where no one should be. I arrived one September evening, determined to explore the ghostly remnants of the town. My goal was to photograph the decayed piers and scattered buildings before the tide came in. I parked my truck near a broken fence marking the old harbor. The Gulf wind swept across the empty streets, carrying salt, sand, and the faint scent of rotting wood. At first, everything seemed calm. Crickets chirped, the water lapped gently at the eroded shoreline, and the ruins lay still under a half-moon sky. But as I walked along the street toward the center of town, I noticed something unusual, a faint flicker of light, like a candle, deep in one of the old structures. Curiosity drew me closer. The building was half-collapsed, wooden beams jutting out at odd angles. I entered carefully, flashlight in hand, and saw it, a single candle burning on what remained of a counter. Its flame flickered despite the wind, casting long, trembling shadows across the floor. I called out. "Hello?" No response. Just the soft crackle of the candle. Then I saw movement. A figure at the far end of the room, barely visible in the dim candlelight. At first, I thought it was another photographer or a local checking the ruins, but something felt wrong. The figure moved slowly, deliberately, almost gliding over the broken floorboards without making a sound. I raised my camera. The figure froze. I stepped forward. Its head tilted slightly, and the flame reflected off pale skin, but the face, it was obscured, like it had been blurred from the world itself. Then the candle went out. The room plunged into darkness. My flashlight flickered and dimmed. I could hear it, soft footsteps, not on the creaking boards, but hovering just above the floor. I spun, searching for the source, but the figure was gone. Only shadows remained. I ran outside, but the air had changed. The wind was heavier, colder, almost tangible, pressing against me like I was being held back. I glanced back at the building. A light appeared again, a single candle burning in the exact same spot. I approached cautiously. The closer I got, the more I realized, there was no way the candle could have been placed there. No matches, no wax. Nothing to account for the light that seemed alive. The flame danced even without wind, illuminating faint outlines of people in the shadows, shapes that weren't there before. Suddenly, I heard whispers, soft and indistinct at first, then growing louder. Words I couldn't understand, phrases that made no sense. The whispers seemed to come from every direction, surrounding me, pressing against my ears. My heart raced, and I stumbled back toward my truck. As I ran across the street, I caught a glimpse of the figure again. This time, closer, floating slightly above the ground, a faint glow emanating from its form. It tilted its head and laughed, a sound soft and eerie, echoing off the ruined walls, carrying a strange melancholy. I jumped into my truck and drove away, the candlelight and figure fading into the distance. But the experience stayed with me. Later, when reviewing my photos, I noticed something impossible. In several frames, faint glowing shapes appeared where no one was standing, shadows moving independently of the environment. Locals told me afterward that this is common in Indianola. People visiting at night sometimes see candlelight in abandoned buildings, hear voices, or glimpse figures moving just out of reach. They call them the souls left behind by the storm, spirits tied to the town, trapped between water and land, longing for the life they lost. Even now, when the Gulf winds blow across the ruins of Indianola, I remember the candle, the pale figure, and the whispers that followed me back to my truck. I don't know if it's a ghost, a memory, or something else entirely, but I do know this: the lights of Indianola are not for the living. And they are still there, waiting for anyone daring enough to step into the ruins after dark. The Horsemen of Luckenbach. Luckenbach, Texas, is famous for its music, small-town charm, and legendary parties, but few remember that beneath its cheerful facade lies a history steeped in hardship, isolation, and stories that refuse to fade. Locals still whisper about a mysterious horseman who rides alone in the dead of night, a shadow on the horizon, appearing and disappearing as if he exists in two worlds at once. I first heard about the horseman during a trip to Central Texas. I was traveling through the hill country, drawn by the quiet, rolling hills, the sprawling ranches, and the eerie stories of abandoned settlements. A local bartender, wiping down the counter, leaned over and said in a low tone, "You don't want to be in Luckenbach after midnight, not when the horseman rides." I laughed it off. It sounded like a legend, a story for tourists. But curiosity got the better of me. I decided to spend a night there, determined to explore the outskirts where the old ranch roads wound through dark woods and forgotten fields. It was early November when I arrived, just after sunset. The sky was overcast, and a low fog began to roll in across the hills. I parked my truck near the edge of town and stepped out, the chill in the air carrying a scent of damp earth and pine. The roads were empty. Even the crickets were quiet, as if the town itself was holding its breath. I walked along an old dirt path that led to a small abandoned ranch. Rusted fencing lined the road, the posts leaning like tired sentinels. My flashlight cut through the fog, illuminating broken barns and corroded metal equipment. Everything was silent, eerily still. Then I heard it, the faint sound of hooves on dirt. Slow, deliberate. Measured. Too rhythmic to be a deer or coyote. My heart skipped a beat. I paused, listening. The sound was coming from the ridge above the road, moving parallel to me, but I couldn't see anything. I raised my camera, trying to capture movement, but the fog was thick, and the moonlight barely pierced the gloom. I stepped forward cautiously, and the sound stopped. Complete silence. My ears strained, and that's when I saw him. A figure on horseback, standing at the crest of the hill. The horse was black, almost blending into the shadows. The rider was taller than any man should be, wearing a long coat that flapped like wings in the wind. A wide-brimmed hat obscured his face. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watched me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I stepped back, whispering, "Hello?" The figure tilted his head slightly. Then, without a sound, he started down the hill. The horse's hooves struck the ground in a rhythm that echoed across the empty landscape. The fog twisted around him, hiding him one moment, revealing him the next. I tried to follow with my flashlight and camera, but every time I thought I was getting closer, he seemed farther away. The distance between us shifted impossibly fast. Shadows stretched, contracted, and the rider never broke pace. It was like he existed outside of time, moving according to a different clock than the one I was bound to. I stopped at an old windmill, heart pounding, unsure whether to run or keep observing. The rider circled the field, his presence magnetic, pulling my eyes to him despite the fear rising in my chest. Then he did something I didn't expect. He raised one gloved hand. A slow, deliberate wave, acknowledging my presence, but not in a friendly way. More like a warning. The wind shifted, carrying a faint whisper. I swear I heard words, but they were fragmented, broken. "Leave, this night belongs." Before I could react, the horseman vanished. No hooves, no shadow, nothing. 1 second he was circling the field, the next the fog was empty, silent, and still. My flashlight shook in my hand, and the cold pressed against me as if the night itself was alive. I ran back to my truck, glancing behind me constantly. The roads were empty, the hills silent. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the impression that those eyes, beneath the wide-brimmed hat, had followed me even as I fled. I spoke with locals the next day. They told me the legend: a rancher who had died decades ago, alone, his horse never returned after a storm swept through the area. They say he rides every full moon or in the dead of foggy nights, guarding the hills, warning trespassers to stay away. People who encounter him claim the air grows cold, and their hearts pound as if their own life force is being measured. I haven't returned to that road at night since. But whenever I pass through the hill country, I glance at the ridges and hills. Sometimes, I think I see a shadow in the fog, a horse and rider moving silently through the night, always watching, always waiting. Luckenbach is known for music and fun, but the horseman reminds anyone daring enough to wander off the beaten path that some legends are rooted in something older and darker. Something that doesn't forgive curiosity. Something that waits in the mist and darkness, moving as silently and relentlessly as death itself. And sometimes, if you listen closely on a foggy night, you can still hear the rhythm of hooves echoing across the empty fields, announcing the return of the horseman of Luckenbach. The Bells of Thurber. Thurber, Texas, is a near-forgotten ghost town in the western part of the state. Once a booming coal mining town, it's now a place where abandoned buildings lean precariously, streets are cracked with weeds, and the echoes of the past seem almost alive. Locals rarely venture there after dusk, claiming the old bell towers still ring, though no one has lived here to pull a rope in decades. I arrived in Thurber on a quiet autumn evening, the sun just touching the horizon. The sky was streaked with reds and purples, and the air was unusually still. The town had a strange emptiness that was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the buildings themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something. I parked near the center of town, by what remained of the old company store. The wind whispered through broken windows, carrying with it the faint scent of coal dust and rust. I had read about the bells online, accounts from locals, amateur historians, and paranormal enthusiasts. They spoke of hearing the bells toll at night, strange voices, and shadows that moved inside abandoned buildings. Most dismissed them as folklore. I wasn't so sure. As I walked down the cracked streets, my flashlight cutting through the early shadows, I felt eyes on me. Not human eyes, but something intangible, the feeling of being observed by the history itself, by the people who had lived and died here long ago. The first strange sound came as I passed the old church. A low, resonant toll, like a bell swinging in the wind, echoed through the town. I froze. My flashlight trembled in my hand. The building was boarded up, the bell tower was hollow, the rope long gone. Yet the sound repeated, soft at first, then louder, echoing across the empty streets. I approached cautiously. The door to the church was splintered, half hanging from its hinges. Inside, shadows stretched long across the walls, distorted by my flashlight. Dust hung in the air like fog. But the bell, it sounded again. Clear, deliberate, like someone had pulled it with intent. I called out, my voice cracking slightly. "Hello? Is someone here?" Silence. Only the echo of the bell fading. Then I heard a voice behind me. Soft, almost melodic, singing in a language I couldn't understand. I spun around. Nothing. The street was empty. The wind had picked up slightly, but it couldn't have carried a voice that close, that precise. I moved toward the old hotel, the sound of the bells and the singing guiding me. Every step seemed to draw the sound closer, yet when I looked around, I saw nothing. Broken windows reflected my flashlight beam, giving the illusion of movement, shadows that weren't there. Inside the hotel lobby, the air was heavy with decay. Wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips. Furniture lay in disarray. I shone my light across the room and froze. A figure stood at the far end, a woman in a long, tattered dress, holding something in her hands. I couldn't see her face. The light from my flashlight seemed to bend around her, creating shadows that shouldn't exist. I took a cautious step forward. She raised her hand slightly. And then I saw it, the bell. A small, handheld bell, glowing faintly as if lit from within. She rang it once. The sound echoed perfectly, impossibly, through the building. "Who are you?" I whispered. No answer. Only the bell. I moved closer, and with each step, I felt something pressing against my chest, like an unseen weight. The air grew colder. My breath came in visible clouds. The singing resumed, soft and mournful, surrounding me, wrapping around the walls. Suddenly, the figure vanished. The bell's glow faded. And I realized the sound was no longer coming from the bell in her hands. It was coming from all around me, the walls, the ceiling, even the floor. Bells tolled in rhythm, discordant yet hypnotic. My flashlight flickered violently, and I stumbled back, tripping over broken floorboards. I ran out into the street, the bell sounds chasing me, fading only as I reached the edge of town. Behind me, the building seemed to sigh, settle, returning to silence. But the memory of the bells, the glowing figure, and the haunting singing stayed. Locals I spoke with later told me that the miners and their families had a tradition of ringing a bell to mark births, deaths, and accidents in the mines. When the mines closed and the town was abandoned, the bell ritual never ended, not entirely. Some say the spirits of the miners, the wives, and the children remain, carrying the echoes of their lives into the present, ringing bells for those who dare walk the empty streets at night. I left Thurber that night, shaken but alive. The bells follow me sometimes in dreams, faint, mournful, insistent. And I know that the town waits, patient, for the next visitor, the next curious soul, to hear the bells that should not exist and to glimpse the glowing figure that reminds the living that the past is never truly gone. So guys, that's it for today's story. If this video gave you chills, make sure to subscribe to House of Horrors. New horror stories every day. And yeah, sleep safe tonight.